Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
Grand Prix Memphis. Standard. People are loving Standard. I've seen so many tweets since Grand Prix Memphis about how balanced, how cool, how surprising, how refreshing Standard is right now.
Yes. And it's been evolving week after week. You know, there was initially some concern about the red aggro decks and Grixis energy. And even though those two have proven to be real strong, you know, defining forces in the format, they're not the end of the story. And Grand Prix Memphis, we saw quite a bit more. You know, like, I mean, obviously Grixis energy had a great weekend with 3 in the top 8, for instance. But, dude, what about Green-Red Monsters, Tyler Schroeder?
He's the champion, right? He's the Memphis
winner.
So, brand new deck, Green-Red Monsters. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's
well,
green,
this is actually so it's tricky because this is actually I think more properly an update. A very unexpected update to the green-red. I don't know if green-red monsters is the terminology that people were using a few weeks ago, but there was a similar style of deck with 2 major differences. I guess 3 major differences. The Glorybringer, Jadelight Ranger, Merfolk Branchwalker, Rekindling Phoenix, Abrade, Magma Spray sort of collective. That has already been showing up.
Like in Conduits, though, right?
Well, and just red green, but there's a big twist. This is just such a radical different direction. 4 Earthshaker Kenras and 3 Resilient Kenras. That's so different of an angle. Instead of playing with mana acceleration, instead of playing with mana creatures, he's playing with creatures that are more 2-for-1s. Early on, they're a 2-power creature. They could block if need be, but they're just an additional threat. And they each have a few, miscellaneous options, whether it's haste and some amount of evasion, or Resilient Kenra's ability to pump and win a head-to-head. But later, he can flash them back. And, with the Eternalize ability, getting big extra value from them coming back as 4/4s. But what's more, they make the Jadelight Rangers and Merfolk Branchwalkers into way more than the sum of their parts.
Oh, wow. Because that's really cool.
That's the technology. And so now it's not just that Earthshaker Kenra is an implied 2-for-1 over the time, the life of the deck, or over the course of the game. Jadelight Ranger 3-for-1, Branchwalker 2-for-1. But what's obviously when you draw the extra land, you're getting the extra cards. But being able to actually get virtual spells by flipping these Kenras, that's just such a hot new dimension to add to the deck. And it gives the deck a lot more reach. When you've got Earthshaker Kenra's haste and pseudo evasion, and then Resilient Kenra's ability to pump a creature like Rekindling Phoenix that already has evasion, we're talking about a very, very exciting way to level up this archetype into something that, even though it shares 50 of the same cards, it has a very different tenor to it, a very different feel.
Yeah, I think this deck, which won the tournament, such a good example of kind of even its small seeming tweaks to standard deck that gives us a completely different kind of looking final product. The technology is so different here, and that's actually
there's a couple other pieces of tech too.
Is it going to become industry standard? Do you think? Kind of Kenra Eternalize combined with Explore. It seems exciting. Awesome now. Right now that you say it out loud.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see. I wonder what other decks. This technology was first kind of. I guess I don't want to say pioneered, but the first place I really saw it was with the the Champion of Wits. You know, when the black 2-drop would explore, see Champion of the Wits, and then bin it. But so often Champion of the Wits was just so good that you would just want to keep it anyway. Here, though, I mean, when you don't have Earthshaker Kenra and Resilient Kenra giving you 2-drop threats that are actually, you know, legit threats, that later you don't want to draw a 2-drop, but you would love to draw a cantrip 4-power threat. So there's a couple other pieces of technology here, though. So to begin with, and this is a card that you've talked about on previous weeks, Struggle to Survive. What do you think about a couple copies of Struggle to Survive?
So Struggles to Survive is a red-green Aftermath card. The front side is Struggle, which is 2R for an instant. It deals damage to target creature equal to the number of lands you control. So it's kind of Skrettish, but it doesn't have the snow restriction. Costs 3 times as much mana, but this deck, I think probably this deck's going to have a lot of mana in play. It's got 25 lands and all those Explore guys. But then in addition, it's got Survive, which is a sorcery. Play with Aftermath for 1 and a G. Each player shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library. So Survive is interesting, right? Like, it can help you against Godpharaoh's Gift. It can help you against the Scarab God. It might even, you know, mess up Approach of the Second Sun a little bit. Right, so it angles the opponent a little bit, I think.
Oh, yeah, and there's a couple other aspects of it that I think are worth calling out. First of all, it may sound like a joke to be flipping Survive to your Merfolk Branchwalker or Jadelight Ranger, but it's not nothing. You can actually put it to use against the extremely popular Rekindling Phoenix. Like, if your opponent has a Rekindling Phoenix and you have a Rekindling Phoenix, well, you got to be careful, but sometimes your Rekindling Phoenix might come back and theirs hasn't come back yet. Or if just they have a Rekindling Phoenix and you just kill it with an Abrade, sometimes you just want to shuffle it back with the Survive and keep trucking. But what's more, it messes up Torrential Gearhulk, and because it's shuffling both of your graveyards back, it actually gives you a way to make sure the Scarab God has no food anywhere.
Yeah. I think that the Rekindling Phoenix is a good example, because oftentimes you're going to need 2 cards to deal with the Rekindling Phoenix, and in the case of using Survive to deal with it, you're only using half a card, so it's like 1.5.
Well, you can actually struggle it and then survive.
Yep. So that's not too bad, considering the strength of the Rekindling Phoenix.
Yep.
The other thing is, if you're going to cast Survive in a long game, because you already have a bunch of lands in play, presumably you're just kind of goosing your library. Your library is going to be much more spell-intensive in all likelihood than like a regular distribution of lands and spells that you would get, starting from turn 1.
What do you think of Ajani Archer in the sideboard? This isn't the first time we've seen it, but it's not exactly industry standard.
Yeah, so Ajani Archer is 2 and a G for a 1/4 creature with reach. So, large toughness creature relative to its casting cost. But it has this ability that when it enters the battlefield, you may have it fight another target creature. So you can come down and shoot at something with 1 toughness. Can you give it the ability to, maybe put that ability on the stack and then hit it with a Blossoming Defense or something like that? Otherwise,
I think in general, though, you want to be shooting people's Earthshaker Kenras and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was thinking like, it's a pretty good.
Or their Glint Sleeve Siphoner is one of the best.
Yep. Or just a straight up against like an opponent PNLR, right? You can just play it. It's a 1/4, can contain Pia's 2/2 body, and then ting the Thopter, right? So,
yep,
just slow stuff down. There's a lot of stuff that's really good. That's 2/1s that we're seeing right now, like Branchwalkers and Jadelight Rangers that explored for lands rather than spells are 2/1s, and if the opponent's got 1 of each, you can play your Ajani Archer, shoot 1 of them, and then 1/4 beats up 2/1 all day. So. That's it's a pretty good defensive position. It is not a super intuitive card, I will grant you, but I think that potentially in context, it's going to be very, very effective against some of the creatures people are playing right now.
So, dude, we got to switch to the second place. This makes me happy. Aaron Barich, apologize about the name. Aaron finished second with a Sultai Constrictor deck, which very much a Winding Constrictor, Glint Sieve Siphoner, Bristling Hydra, Walking Ballista, Jadelight Ranger, Servant of the Conduit, Winding, all that kind of stuff we've seen. Vraska's Contempt, Blossoming Defense, Fatal Push, Verdurous Gearhulk. All this sounds totally like just a normal black-green energy deck, right? But...
oh, boy.
Sultai... do you mean the Scarab God? Oh, no. No. There's no room for the Scarab God. Not a single the Scarab God. Why, how could we when we have to support Hadana's Climb instead?
Hadana's Climb is a legendary enchantment for 1 GU. It has the text, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then... if that creature has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, transform Hadana's Climb. So
I told you this card was going to show up.
Yeah, I think this card's really cool, right? So it becomes Winged Temple of Orazca. So the temple itself has wings, which is a legendary land. It can tap for any color of mana, but its other ability is 1 GU. Target creature you control gains flying. It gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is its power. Patrick Chapin, what do you think about Winding Constrictor, Hadana's Climb into Bristling Hydra, for example? How's that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the ability to... first of all, just the ability to have an extra mana source from this in order to cast those Verdurous Gearhulks, that can be already kind of a nice touch, right? But even beyond that, the ability to double your creature's stats, being able to double the stats and also gain flying.
Yeah, send it to the air.
Yeah, and remember, the Winding Constrictor does synergize with this anyway, right? Like if you play Winding Constrictor, each turn that when you have Hadana's Climb, each turn you get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on something. And it makes it very easy to flip this thing as fast as possible.
Or if you don't want to flip it, if you just want to distribute counters 2 at a time or even 1 at a time if you don't have the Winding Constrictor, you can do that also, right? This is a pretty good go wide card.
Yeah. I think this is just phenomenal. I think that the biggest challenge is ostensibly the mana. And I think that part of the theory here is the Jadelight Ranger and Servant of the Conduit. I mean, you already had Servant of the Conduit, but that Jadelight Ranger was doing enough to help make up for the loss of Attune with Ether.
Yep, I agree. It makes me so happy to see the 2 kind of breakout decks at the top of this tournament be such interesting different takes. But I hadn't at least seen these specific 60s or 75s in Standard before and seem awesome. And just obviously to note, Blossoming Defense, awesome in this deck. Absolutely backbreaking. I was playtesting last weekend. I was like, I'm going to stop this Hadana's Climb Wing Temple flip. What can he possibly do? Oh, for G. Yeah. I got worked. And then then if you Blossom the Defense and then they resolve the ability on the Winged Temple, that's just 4 more damage. Not even 2 more damage. That's the worst. Think about that mana to damage conversion. 4 for 1 mana.
I've seen slightly more efficient. But,
Yeah, it's this deck is the real deal. Although I do think that maybe there should be the Scarab God somewhere, right? Isn't it a good backup plan or something?
Dude, I don't know, man. Yeah, probably. Dude, so what did you think of Ari Lax's 12th place Naya Monsters list? He took that same familiar Glorybringer, Jadelight Ranger, Merfolk Branchwalker, Rekindling Phoenix package and splashed Ajani Unyielding, Cast Out, and Thopter Arrest.
Yeah, this is look, in my opinion, this is something we hadn't seen at all, right? Like Ajani Unyielding, 6 casting cost Planeswalker, Thopter Arrest. Like it's not neither of these is a particularly commonly played card, right? And then
I don't know. Thopter Arrest is okay. It's seen some. It doesn't get as much spotlight just because Ixalan's Binding, which Ari does have in the sideboard. Ixalan's Binding and Cast Out so often like hog the glory, but it's been putting up W's.
I mean, it's fine, right? Like it's
just fine. It's just fine.
I mean, it's the definition of fine, but that and Ajani Unyielding to come in as a third color against this this red-green kind of core engine is a little surprising to me. What I really thought was interesting was only 3 Rekindling Phoenix, to make room for them. I think I would have been more excited by Rekindling Phoenix number 4 than maybe one of the white cards, but he's also got Carnage Tyrant in the sideboard. Big card, Carnage Tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
So, real monstrous here.
So what did you think of, did you see Sam Pardee's Abzan tokens? So it was like, that sort of standard black-white Anointer Priest, Hidden Stockpile, Anointed Procession, Fumigate, Cast Out, all that stuff, right? Legion's Landing. So a couple, and then Splashing Green for Vraska Relic Seeker. So a couple of nice little twists. First of all, Sam rocking 4 copies of Start to Finish. 4 copies. And then second, Profane Procession, 1+1, which I like to see. And then in the sideboard, he's just got all the different Oblivion Rings. A Cast Out, an Ixalan's Binding, a Thopter Arrest, Profane Procession, Settle the Wreckage. That's so many different
exile
ways to exile your opponent's the Scarab God, Lost Legacy, anything. But no, what did you think of 4 copies of Start to Finish?
Maybe that's just going to be industry standard, right? Like, so it's in colors. I think that a lot of the time when you play these Aftermath cards, you're playing them for the upside, like, because you can play both sides. It's in his colors, and he wants to create tokens, right? Like, that's super right in the middle of the target. It
is very on plan.
I don't know. I don't know what's so exciting about this deck other than the shifts in the format, including, I think, the rotation specifically of the Rampaging Ferocidon kind of open up the door to kind of reallow this archetype in. Like, Ferocidon is really good against making some 1/1s, right? Right, you are really punished by making the 1/1s, and that guy going away just makes it so that you don't have that downside if you have a strategy such as this. Also, obviously, just disincentivizing, Attune with Aether, etc., just takes decks that might have been maybe mid-tier 2 and just moves them up a little bit on the how good something might be in the metagame map. Sure.
But, there's also some brand new decks that, part of their presence in the format is just the printing of new Rivals of Ixalan cards, but part of it is that by having a little bit more breathing room at the top, there's more room for new archetypes like Jack Kiefer's White-Black City's Blessing list. This is a very, very different take on White-Black tokens. No hidden stockpiles, no Start to Finish, none of that type of stuff. Instead, this is crested Sunmare tokens.
Yeah.
So he's got Dusk
He's got Horse
Legions.
Tribal.
Yeah.
But
Dusk
only
Legion-
3. That's actually the thing that... Why not the 4th Horse Tribal when you're going to go this way?
Curve considerations, I assume. So this is an interesting mix of creatures. So he's got 4 Legions Lieutenant, 4 Dusk Legion Zealot, and 4 Martyr of Dusk. Those are his creatures. I mean, he's also, in addition to the 3 Crested Sunmares. And then he's got Queen's Commission for vampire token making, Call to the Feast for vampire token making, Legion's Landing, more vampire token making, and then Radiant Destiny to name vampires.
Yep.
As an additional way to pump his tokens.
Radiant Destiny, I think, is a really deceptively great card in Standard. I played against black-white Vampires decks a fair amount, just testing last weekend, and just really subtly, it just turns off Moment of Craving, right, for a lot of the time, where let's say your opponent's got a Legion Lieutenant, which is typically a 2/2 creature, but you're like, oh, wow, I have this card that's really awesome against small creatures. Well, it's good against some small creatures, but that +1/+1 really, really bothers you if you have very, very specific anti-beatdown cards.
Yep.
This deck is like crazy about generating 1/1 vampires with lifelink, right? But like Call to the Feast is not an intuitive card for me, right? So 3, I guess it's okay. Like 3 power and toughness across 3 bodies for 4 mana.
I mean, they consider like Hordling Outburst was great, right?
Yeah, but
and
it's
for
a full mana less.
Yeah, but it doesn't have. Each of the creatures don't have lifelink, and that's not even counting the tribal, right? Because if you have on turn 3 the Radiant's Destiny,
it's like 6 power for 4, right?
Right. Like having access to just as many of the vampire tokens as you can get your hands on, there's a lot to like about that. And it just literally just turn 3 Radiant's Destiny, turn 4 Call to the Feast. That's a very potent opening, and that's to say nothing of whatever you played on turn 2, like the Legion Lieutenant.
Yeah, and you could just like have a ton of power and then slam down Sunmare on turn 5 and swing with everybody. Or swing with one guy. Who cares? Swing with one guy. Forget about swinging with everybody.
So
lives, dies, doesn't matter.
What do you think of the lack of Maverin Fanes?
Subtly, I think this deck doesn't have that many non-token vampires, right?
Right. Like, how many do you think it takes?
2 more minimum. But Maverin Fan is himself a non-token vampire. I think that might have been a miss.
Well, but here's the thing: this list doesn't really have much worth killing. Maybe I would kill Legion's Lieutenant, but like maybe part of the gain is not wanting to give your opponent juicy abrade targets.
Yeah, but they're going to spend it on something.
That's
right?
true.
Like you're going to spend it on a token if you don't have a better option, right? Like the one lifelink will often add up, and like we've talked about between Legion Lieutenant and Radiant Destiny, like those guys could be like 3/3s. I think Martyr of Dusk is actually surprisingly good. The guy's basically 3 power for 2 mana across 2 bodies. It's just kind of time delayed. The lifelink's pretty relevant. I found it an annoying creature to play against personally.
Sure. Dude, Grasping Scoundrel, putting up its first top 32 finish in the hands of Christopher McMahon's 31st place finishing mono black aggro. We've been seeing this style of mono black from time to time with Bone Picker, Dread Wanderer, Night Market Lookout, Vicious Conquistador. Like that's already a lot of 1-drops, right?
Yeah,
but then Grasping Scoundrel?
So between them all, right, between Vicious Conquistador and Night Market Lookout, those are both 1 power creatures for B, but they effectively get in for more than that because of their tap abilities. But then between Grasping Scoundrel and Dread Wanderer, these are essentially 2-power creatures that attack for 1 mana. But I think they feel very similar to one another. I think that a lot of the time the Night Market Lookout or the Vicious Conquistador will actually be a little bit better because of how they interact, like against removal and blocking. But yeah, I don't know. This deck can put up a lot of offense that way. And the thing that is, I think, important here is that the Aether Sphere Harvester only requires 1 to crew, and that's really, really strong with Night Market Lookout and Vicious Conquistador. Well, actually, specifically Night Market Lookout, but any of these small guys can crew it.
The 19 1-drops? Isn't this just going to be so much a turn 1, 2-power threat, turn 2, 2 more 2-power threats, and then just, steamroll people with Fatal Push, Supernatural Stamina, both making for very high tempo turns, and with just 19 land, this is a deck that's going to just be coming at you very, very aggressively.
Yeah, it's super volatile, though. Right? So the great draws where you draw like exactly 3 lands and you draw like a high concentration of your hyper offensive 1-drops in your opening hand, and you're on the play, you are going to feel awfully unstoppable. But this deck has no way to regulate its draw. It only has 19 lands. Like, how can you even not keep a hand that has 1 if near dead lands, no swamp, and then a bunch of 1-drops to cast if you're going second? Like, that hand can get horrible real quick, right? So I think that there's puts and takes here. Like, it looks fantastic sometimes, and you are absolutely helpless sometimes.
Yeah, but that's just the way life is.
That's not the way life is. For example, for decks with Opt, right? Like, decks with Hieroglyphic Illumination can often dig themselves out of those situations. But on the other hand, they don't, have this level of, attacking for 8 or whatever on turn 3.
Mm-hmm. So did any of the Grixis energy decks kind of stand out to you?
Actually, I thought it might be great to talk about the blue-black mid-range decks. A lot of really good players put up top 32 finishes with this. Is it a new blue-black mid-range deck? Like Brad Nelson, Corey. There's tons of good players all made top 32 with this deck, and I think that it's meaningfully different than a lot of the decks that we've seen perform in the last couple of months, but doesn't really do anything. We at least talked about some of these themes.
Yeah, I mean, we saw, some early versions of this at SCGs earlier in the season, but I think that the more recent versions are kind of pushing it even further, where they just have so many value creatures, like Champion of Wits, Gifted Aetherborn, Glintsleeve Siphoner, Gonti, Ravenous Chupacabra, the Scarab God, Torrential Gearhulk, Walking Ballista, and then Virtual Liliana Death's Majesty. That's just so many threats, This is just a much, much more proactive take on blue-black.
Yeah, I think it's real difficult to kind of trade punches with this deck. Like, if you're the Abrade guy, if you're the Lightning Strike guy, you could really stand to fall behind, right? Like, Gifted Aetherborn is great against you. If you're the Fatal Push guy, right, and the opponent's got Champion of Wits, Glintsleeve Siphoner, Scarab God, Torrential Gearhulk.
Wait, what was that one?
I'm sorry, the Scarab God.
Oh, sure.
The Scarab God, Torrential Gearhulk, etc. Trading 1-for-1 with those guys, you are going to fall behind, especially when he's got a commit to memory somewhere.
Yeah,
Chartacourse, man, Chartacourse is
dude, I love Chartacourse. I wish more of these decks played more than 2.
Yeah, when I see Chartacourse, typically Godpharaoh's Gifts decks are playing it for not card advantage, even though they could get card advantage with it, because they, I guess they just want to kind of build up their graveyard. This deck typically, I think, wants to just draw extra cards, right? It doesn't want to necessarily just fill up the graveyard.
Dude, I don't know. If you got Liliana, discard a Torrential Gearhulk, then get it down on turn 5 in order to flash back your Vraska's Contempt.
Yeah. I mean, I could see it happening sometimes. I think
you're going to want the 2 cards most of the time.
Probably want to just grind yourself in a position where you're casting those cards each to get, compounding advantages, not just getting like a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 once. You can get them. It's like 4-for-1 now. If you can get the Torrential Gearhulk and then trade and then use Liliana's Death's Majesty to get it back. So much advantage.
So the I guess the Grixis quasi Grixis energy deck that I did want to mention, which I mean it's not even totally fair to call it Grixis energy since he's splashing. So I guess it's technically a 4-color energy, but Kohei Yoshino's Grixis energy deck splashing 2 copies of Vraska Relic Seeker. That's an exotic take on Grixis energy, right? Like he's got the Glint Sleeve Siphoner, Whirler Virtuoso, the Scarab God, Gonti, Torrential Gearhulk, lots of the usual stuff, Vraska's Contempt, Abrade, Harness Lightning. But 2 copies of Vraska Relic Seeker off of the 4 Ether Hubs, 2 Evolving Wilds, and a Forest. Actually, he's got a Rootbound Crag in there, too. But then, what's more, 2 main deck copies of Argul's Bloodfast.
Yeah, I think that Forest is dangerous magic. That's I
mean, that's been true for 25 years.
Yeah, but like this is a pretty solid strategy. As you said earlier, there were 3 kind of not green Grixis energy decks that made the top 8. Vraska's a good card, right? But there are a lot of good cards. And I don't see that Vraska's doing anything so synergistic with this deck, right? Like it's not doing anything that makes the creatures better. The Forest is tough for me. This is a deck that's got all kinds of like commitment to second turn black, early commitment to double black, might have to have red on demand. Like that's a tough get within Evolving Wilds, right? If it's your first land, like you're almost never going to want to do that.
Yeah, but I mean, you've only got 2 Evolving Wilds anyway.
Yeah,
dude. Just rely on the Ether Hub.
All right. I mean, if we just go Ether Hub, then I guess there's going to be plenty of fuel for an Ether Hub.
I just wish that we could get an Angrath the Flame Chained in the main deck. I appreciate that he's at least got one in the sideboard. I just think that once you're at this kind of a space, I think Angrath is just, I mean, that's what's for dinner. No bull.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about Argul's Bloodfast main deck, rather than Search for Azcanta, for example? Right? Like, rather
I don't like Search for Azcanta in this deck.
At all? He's got one in the sideboard.
Yeah, I'm talking about in the main deck. In the sideboard is okay, particularly since some of the spots where you're actually boarding it in, you're going to be, it's more actually. Does he even have search? Why would he have Search for Azcanta in the sideboard?
He's got it.
I don't think it. No, he doesn't.
Yeah, he does. Absolutely has Search for Azcanta in the sideboard.
Oh yeah, he does.
I mean,
but it's okay, I guess.
The Scarab God. It's synergistic with Torrential Gearhulk. It's synergistic with just having cheap instants.
It's okay.
I think it's a great card. I mean, I don't know if it's great in this deck, right? Like,
yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's another way to get card advantage that doesn't die to opposing Vraska's Contempts. And I think that's part of what's going on here.
I think fighting this deck with Vraska's Contempt, even when you have 4 Vraska's Contempt, is a challenging proposition, right? Like, the Scarab God demands Vraska's Contempt, but inevitably you're going to spend Vraska's Contempt on somebody else, right? Like, are you a Torrential Gearhulk deck? How many Vraska's Contempts do you have left for the Scarab God? I think that card is kind of table stakes here, but I think it's tough to fight this deck this way, especially because the Virtuoso gives you that completely different line.
Mm-hmm. Dude, can we really not get Doomfall back in the main deck, though? I know it doesn't work with the Torrential Gearhulk, but I love a Doomfall.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this today. What do you love about a Doomfall? Like, what about that card do you love about it?
Being able to hit my opponent's approach of the second sun, even though it's game 1. being able to hit my opponents the Scarab God.
Whether it's top or bottom, right?
No matter whatever's popping.
Yeah. It's a very versatile card. Yeah, I thought I was thinking about this. It's just like
being able to hit Azret.
Oh, yeah. But does it often do the thing that you want it to do? Like, the thing that I am a little apprehensive about Doomfall is, like, I often feel like I'm in a corner with Doomfall.
I mean, you have to work for it.
I guess
it offers you big things, but you do have to work for it.
It has tools to put you where you want to be, right? It has cheap removal like Magna Spray and Abrade to kind of corner the Scarab God or corner that Hazoret.
Yeah, I love the effect it has, though, in terms of adding play, adding depth to the format. You know, the fact that you have the ability to solve a wider range of problems, but you have to work harder to do so. I love that. I think they should be making more cards like that. I think that's super cool. You know, Doomfall is a card that it's hard to make work, but it can do so much more for you. It's not just random. Like, it can do a lot for you if you can set it up right. So that's what I like. There is at least one more kind of.
Before we jump off this deck,
yeah, go ahead.
Let's talk about Argos Bloodfast in the main deck.
Sure. What do you want to talk about it?
I love Argos Bloodfast. I like it as a sideboard card. I think it's real dodgy in the main deck. A lot of the decks in this format are like Earthshaker Kenra, Glorybringer, you just offense driving down your throat. It's great against It's actually not even great against Approach of the Second Sun here because all of his Doomfalls, negates, and duresses are in the sideboard. Right? He's just like drawing cards with Argos Bloodfast, but he's not.
Well, I think it's for the mirror. I think it's when facing other sort of mid-rangey 2-for-1 grinding decks, right? Like if you play against one of those blue-black decks and you have Argos Bloodfast, you're in pretty good shape. And with 2 Moment of Craving, 4 Vraska's Contempt, we're talking about a not inconsequential amount of life gain, particularly with the Torrential Gearhulk being able to run the rebuys and the Scarab God possibly running the rebuys on the rebuys. And then, eventually Argos Bloodfast can flip. It's a little ambitious, but
So I think that if the format goes anywhere in this direction, Cut to Ribbon's main deck, even if you're not playing Azor's Gateway, Cut to Ribbon's main deck is going to be a thing that is going to pay some folks off. Of the Grixis Persuasion. I was playing last week. I was playing a black, white, red control deck, Mardu control deck, and he's just going off with Argos Bloodfast. It's like drawing, like just no care in the world. And I was just like, interesting. Cut that guy, kill you. Sometimes you don't see it coming. And, people are playing Magma Sprays, Harness Lightnings, Moment of Cravings, Abrades, all kinds of these red removal cards that hit one thing, for 1 or 2 mana. That's exactly what Cut to Ribbons does. It's a little bit slower. So it's a little bit better sometimes, right? It's on its face, a Cut to Ribbons might get a 4 toughness creature when a Harness Lightning couldn't, right? And that backside, combined with opponent's Argos Bloodfast, could be a thing.
Yep. And it's something we've seen a lot more out of the Mardu decks and Black Red occasionally. But I can't help but wonder if it could have a home in Grixis. What did you think about the cycling deck? What was it? John Farrow's white-blue cycling deck just outside the top 16. With Drake, it's the sort of Drakehaven style of deck, but instead of he's not playing. It's not as all in as a lot of previous builds of cycling.
He's only got 1 abandoned sarcophagus.
Right, just 3 Drakehavens and 1 abandoned sarcophagus. and not bothering with the with any of the 6s and not bothering with some of the crazy stuff. He's just got Censor, Countervailing Winds, Hieroglyphic Illumination, Renewed Faith, Cast Out, and then some Cycling Lands, and that's it. It's not actually all the way. He's actually playing fair. He's really casting Fumigates and Baffling End and Search for Azcanta and Settle the Wreckage, and just playing like sort of a half blue-white control game.
I love this strategy and the abstract. I think that if I were going to go this way, I would actually want to go deeper. I wouldn't want to.
You wouldn't halfway it?
No, I mean like where's the payoff, right? Like you look at
Drakehaven.
He's only got 3.
Yeah, that's because you don't need any more. You only need 1 to win the game. You've got all these cycling cards. You find it.
But you want to have a high frequency of playing it early, and
why?
Because you want to use your cycling cards to benefit the Drakehaven, not to dig to the Drakehaven, I think. Right? Like, the cycling cards and the Drakehaven luckily work both ways, right? If you don't have a Drakehaven, cycling cards will help you get there. But, having all these, especially one cycling, like, a cast out versus like a 2 cycling, like a countervailing winds, like the whole point of having all those cards is so that you can make your Drakehaven look great, I think. Right? This
that's fair.
So mana intensive, right? Like, for a deck that has theoretically like pretty cheap cards, a lot of these cards are functional printed costs around 2. You need constant fuel. You need constant ability to be tapping mana, and if you're going to go that way, I think you just want to go that way in such a way that you get the payoff. And like the strategy has so many engines available to it, right? You can typically, I guess, people play 4 Drakehaven, 2 Abandoned Sarcophagus, which is like 6 pretty strong payoff cards. If you have both of those in play, it's like you're playing a different format than the opponent. Like, all of your cards literally read like draw a card, make a 2/2, and then do something else cool. And I just want to be in a position where I can enjoy all that.
I don't think that's too much to ask.
I don't know. I mean, like, we're really just talking about getting maybe like 2 cards in, and I think that those 2 cards might be the Baffling Ends, right? Right, like 1 Sarcophagus and 1 Drakehaven. Is that what it looks like to you?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, the Baffling. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to play more to see, because these cycling decks have a deceptive way of, at least, surprising my intuition about what certain numbers mean and so on, just because of how much it's almost got the Turbo Xerox thing going at times, where the cards that don't have cycling, you're just drawing them so much more often than you normally would. So I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
so
like I think Baffling End's a great card for curve considerations, right? It interacts with potentially dangerous stuff. It gives you some breathing room. Like, this deck is a kind of deck that once it's got its engine going on, it will look real impressive, but it has to live to get to its engine going on. And its mana is a little bit ponderous sometimes. Like, if you have
it can be a little dicey.
Desert of the Mindful or Desert of the True as a land, right? It's going to come into play tapped. Like, if your land distribution is like Desert of the True, Glacial Fortress, irrigated farmland, like your deck is not going to be the fastest to come out of the gate. So having a low curve card like Baffling End that, frankly, the majority of opponents can't remove from the battlefield, it's not the worst, right? And then just hopefully draw into your good stuff.
So one last deck I wanted to kind of shout out. Not really any crazy new technology or anything, but he's just an absolute stud. Ephro top 8ing with blue-black control, and this is the more pure, like the 4 Torrential Gearhulk to the Scarab God, with lots of counter spells and removal. Another appearance by that 4 Fatal Push, 3 Moment of Craving, 4 Vraska's Contempt style. Nothing really too crazy here. Another finish from Nazahal. He's got his 2 Argul's Bloodfasts in the sideboard, but I just want to give a shout out to Ephro. continuing to crush it with top 8 number 94.
Yeah, hard to imagine a more pure take on blue-black control. I mean, every single one of these card choices is easily defensible and intuitive. The only thing I'd say is, like, 3 Glimmer of Genius, 2 Hieroglyphic Illumination. In other eras, we might have seen, 4 and 1 or something like that. But most of these cards all make sense. But, like you said, great job to Hall of Famer Ifro. And I think just a great way to see the showcase of Standard, which apparently is the coolest.
Yeah, it's a good time for it. And it's kind of nice to be back into a Standard that's exciting. A lot to figure out. They're kind of a weird amount of 2-for-1s, but every format's got its nuances and its contours. And this format is about a lot of Ravenous Chupacabras and Kenras and the Scarab Gods.
I don't think it's done. I do not think it's done. This format is gonna surprise some folks. I think that mono removal might be a thing that's coming up soon, and I think that's gonna be exciting in its own right. So, we'll be here to talk about it if and when that happens. Maybe make some predictions for the future, battle ourselves, etc.
Dope.
All right, so that's that for this week. This is our second episode. If you missed it yesterday, we had Masters 25 previews that went up yesterday, so check that episode out if you haven't already.
Of course we did.
We did. They were good. One of them was from the highest skill testing format of all time, or so I'm told.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.
For those of you who are seeing these out of order. Thank you guys for joining us week in and week out, and for sharing us on all the social media spots, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that, and Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Congus.
Hey, thanks, Eric.
So, yep, thanks for following. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Jailer hate, ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. The game, the law.